you guys can hear me, right?
Yes, loud and clear.
Great.
Yeah, the mayor, Molly.
What was that?
Look in your email. Unless he just sent it to me. The mayor just needs to be resent the link.
Okay.
Oh yeah, he didn't include you. But I think you have it open. Thanks. I know I lost it too, but I know you sent it to me. I saw it come across. And then I could not find it. I think we're all struggling with that today. Molly, can you please make me co-host?
Thank you, whoever sent me a link. I guess it might have been Molly.
You're welcome.
She had to do the same for me because I don't know where I put the damn things.
Me too.
You know, could be a function of age, right, Craig?
I hate to admit that, Roger.
Sheridan, do you want to do a test? I just, I renamed you and enabled you to speak. But you are muted. So you have to hit *6 to mute and unmute, I believe, in your phone.
Great. Thank you for that reminder. Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Oh, and
Thank
we have
you.
Elise and Banjo. Good. I thought she was out of it, but she's in it.
I'm gonna be in and out depending on the cell service.
Yeah. Where geographically are you?
Right now I'm just leaving Wendover, but we're gonna cross over Nevada.
So you're headed for Wells next.
We're headed for Bishop, California.
Oh, you're headed for Bishop via probably going south.
Yeah, kind of southwest.
All right. Okay. Well, not exactly a densely cell serviced area. All right. So is John Burns expected?
Yes.
Good. Okay. And Sheridan, where are you?
Mayor, we're right outside of Oklahoma City right now.
Oh boy. Widely dispersed.
Given that we're widely dispersed, can you give us like 60 seconds on the status of the snow melt, the mud melt? You know, how are things looking there locally?
Well, they don't look like a normal May. Although in the last week or so, we're starting to see a lot more black on the rock showing on the north side. But as far as the looking to the ski area slopes, it looks like March. Everything is completely covered. There's really nothing, no dirt showing anywhere. The road, the highway is clear. The parking lots are clear. We haven't had any significant snow in the last few weeks, 2 weeks or so. Had a little bit of dusting yesterday, but in general, it looks like winter.
I'm thinking,
Okay, I think we're all assembled. I'd like to call to order the Budget Committee meeting of May 10th, 2023. This meeting will be held in an electronic meeting without an accurate location pursuant to my May 2nd determination. And so that is the meeting of order approval of the 2012 April 12th Budget Committee meeting minutes is the first item of business. And I move that we approve those minutes. I think, Craig, it has to be I guess you're a member of the Budget Committee, so I guess you could second it. Yeah, all right,
I'll
good.
second.
All right, Craig seconds. Discussion. Okay, no discussion. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, any opposed? Motion pass. All right, so now let's get on to the budget discussion for FY24. And is it Jen or Craig that's going to lead this?
I'm going to make some introductory comments. Jen,
Okay.
I'm going to go to Chris first.
Okay,
So,
got it.
The introductory comments are just to remind people that what we've tried to do is come at the budget across the three broad categories of spend. So those three broad categories are our outsourced contracts with outside vendors, our salary and personnel budget, and our projects. At the last meeting, earlier this year, we spent time on the outsourced contracts, and there's not much change in those. Last meeting, we spent quite a bit of time on the salaries and revising the salary and the personnel budget, and that was occupied the bulk of the budget meeting last time. We did not at that time have the project review complete. We have now completed the project review by that project committee, by the CapEx committee. And so Chris is going to take us through that. We do have a new format this time. And if anybody has feedback on the format and they want to give it to either Chris or me, after the meeting, that would be useful. You're going to find we also have a bit of a different format in the overall budget, and Jen will be taking us through that. But first, let's go to the projects, because those are an input into the budget.
Could I just ask one quick question? So last time we talked about the vendor list.
Yep.
This is really a list of, I was trying to get to like the bottom line number, which on here says 190,000, 97,000. So increase in outside business with outside contractors of 197,000. It's about 25%, 20%. But this includes both operating expense, vendors related to operating expense, as well as vendors related to CapEx. So the $190,000 number isn't really much of a bellwether.
That's correct, John. And I would say that is very much a work in progress. One of the things that we're trying to do is to align with the budget categories of the audited accounts. And that's causing some mismatch into which slots they go into. It won't affect any of the analysis that we've done, and everything is in the sort of the more standard template that we've used for years. But yes, all your comments are exactly right. As we revise that stuff after this budget year, we'll separate the CapEx very clearly from the non-CapEx stuff to make it easier to understand.
Cool. I just want to make sure I had it correctly.
No,
And then the one other number that I think at some point, hopefully we'll talk about today, in your presentation last time, we talked about the salary adjustments, and basically the $140,000 number, which represents the adjustments you want to make to the highest paid 4 positions. And then we gross that up by 20%. And came to 174,000. I'm looking forward to an update on that number, wondering, and so at the appropriate time, if you expound
It's in
on that, that
Jen's
would be great.
presentation. It's in
Okay.
Jen's presentation.
Great.
Can I also, since you brought up the vendor contract list, because we're not gonna really get into that document, but I had one kind of, in my mind, major typo in there. On the Life Map Assurance Company for the projected 22-23 year-end estimate, I missed a 0. So it was off by like $11,000. So it's been corrected in everything you're looking at today, but that number was wrong when I sent that report out. So if anybody caught it and was wondering what was going on, there's your answer. It was just I was missing a 0. So, and again, and I'll add that, where it says AP, I get a question about what AP stands for, which is accounts payable. And so I explained this in one of my reports, but we didn't used to cut all of our checks out of accounts payable. And so running a vendor list out of that module of our accounting software, it's a little hard year over year because we didn't have those inputs in previous years. Now we're doing everything out of AP. And so moving forward, it should be a much better tool to use, but we're definitely transitioning right now. So don't weigh too heavily on that, please.
Right, because like Newman Construction, that's part of the water project, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so there's nothing in previous years, even though we did pay them, it didn't come through in these reports, and I could go digging, but that would take a substantial amount of staff time. And I don't know that we want to go in that direction necessarily.
And to emphasize your point, John, I think going forward, what we're going to want to do is to separate those outsourced contracts into 2 categories. It's basically business as usual, and then the CapEx project. All right.
That sounds like a good plan for the future.
Yeah, just not there yet.
Copy.
Chris, do you need help with pulling up the presentation? Because I have it available unless you're ready to go.
I think I'm ready to go. I think I'll use the spreadsheet from which the PDFs originated. And I do just want to ask Craig, is it your vision for this part of the meeting that I would, conclude a discussion of the project's tracking document and the project's plan with, by going into the slides on the shuttle?
Yeah, I think do the whole project, this Excel first, and then go into the slides on the shuttle, because that's a big item, and at least I was confused as hell about what we were proposing, and I think the slides are actually very clear.
Okay. Well, just give me a moment to select the right view. We'll go screen 2. Okay, can you guys see a spreadsheet?
Yes,
Yes,
Okay, and my audio is clear and all that.
yes.
yes.
Okay, so until as recently as the December amended budget, we've always accompanied budget documents with a capital projects plan, and the purpose of that document was to allocate funds in the town of Alta capital projects account to specific uses or projects. Over the last couple of months, the Capital Projects Committee has developed this new document. This is going to replace the capital projects plan. It's updated and I think improved in a few ways that we just wanted to spend a few minutes talking through with you all. Jen and Craig really deserve the credit for developing this document. I was saying to Roger yesterday that Jen developed the x-axis data views or information views in this document, and Craig developed the y-axis. So thanks to Jen and Craig for their vision for this. It really is a great tool that I think we'll learn a lot by using going forward. So some of the key changes here. This document shows project expenses that we, or expenses rather, we consider to be projects, sort of define as projects, funded not just by the capital projects fund or the capital projects fund, I suppose, but by the general fund, the water fund, and the sewer fund. And you can see as you move from left to right that you were able to see, total expenses out of each of those funds per fiscal year. And then, the sum of each of those fund totals is reflected in row 6 here. This is a little out of order with the staff report, but another major change here is that between columns F and P, we have a 10 fiscal year expense projection timeline, so that we can begin forecasting project expenses over a longer time horizon. I think this will be a little bit of a work in progress, just as we adapt to this new framework and way of thinking about our project expenses. A major change, kind of the biggest change to the way we're presenting projects and tracking projects, is this decision level grouping framework here. And I'll just talk through these individually. Kudos to Craig for this awesome Excel formatting scheme here. So the first decision level grouping we have is maintenance projects. And these are actually broken out per facility. So you can view, proposed expense budgets for each of our 4 buildings. And then you can expand the view to see the individual projects where we've identified individual small projects for each of our facilities. So it's for some, for the town office, at the post office, the community center, we do not have individual projects identified for next year, but for Alta Central, we have quite a few. Moving down to approved 23. So these are projects that were approved in the fiscal year 23 capital projects plan and the budget. And these are, some of these projects have been completed. Most of them are in progress. You can see that, we project completing a total of $94,000 worth of projects in fiscal year 23, although that's not, well, yeah, the total for approved 23 projects is $95,000 roughly. Rollover 24 projects, these are projects that were approved in fiscal year 23, but which we do not project completing. We're not going to complete them. So we're just projecting to move them over to fiscal year 24. Decision 24 projects, these are new projects, and we've been discussing several of them for a few years, so they might not sound new. But they weren't proposed in the most recent capital projects plan or the most recent amended budget. So these are projects that we're proposing to the council to fund in the fiscal year 24 budget. Future projects are projects that we don't have enough detail on. We haven't developed a firm budget estimate. We haven't decided that we want to do them just yet. We don't have a detailed project plan. But this is where ideas for new projects will live, and we can, put ideas for more projects on here as they come up. Remove projects, we don't have a whole lot here. I do just want to highlight for the council that we've talked a lot about this community center rear yard erosion control project. The slope behind the community center is, secured by some rockfall netting that's beyond its useful life. We've not identified a viable project that we want that's affordable for the town. And so we've gone ahead and just removed it from the list as we continue to consider, a new community center facility in that location. So that's the groupings, the decision level groupings. I'm going to shrink those back down for the time being. Another couple important details. We removed the project descriptions from this document. Previous capital projects plans included a lot of small font text that described projects sometimes in great detail, and we kind of thought that material muddied the document and took up space that we wanted to use for other reasons or to display other information. I do just want to highlight let's see, that's actually in future projects. The future community center project, the way that we're describing this project has changed substantially. We used to assign a value to this project that was essentially the balance of the capital projects fund less the sum of all the other project budgets. But that was kind of an arbitrary number to some extent. This number is based on a cost estimate that we got from an architect who did a schematic design on a community center, proposed future community center for the town about 20 years ago. That architect updated a cost estimate based on regional construction costs for a similar facility if it was constructed in 2023. So that's, that amount is $3 million. That's not what we assume it's going to cost to build a community center. We do have a couple of other projects in the works to try to refine a projected cost for a new building. But that's a placeholder, just like the other number was. But we're sort of taking a different approach with projecting that expense in this new document. I'll just summarize for you the key information for the purposes of this meeting. We are proposing to spend a total of $761,967 on projects in fiscal year 24, and that includes about $250,000 in new projects for fiscal year 24, and about $483,000 in projects that were approved in fiscal year 23, but that we propose to roll over. So that is what I wanted to just help the council understand, or help the budget committee understand with this document. I don't know if anybody has any questions, if Jen or Craig want to clarify anything or add anything to these key points I've just run through.
I think that was great, Chris. I'd love to present some information and then open it up for questions, just to make sure we get through all the information that we have today, if that's
Sure.
okay.
Okay, yeah.
Jen, let Chris spend just a couple of minutes on the Alta shuttle slides, because that was, I think, confusing in prior presentations.
Sure. Okay. So yeah, the resort shuttle. I guess I will go back to this document real quick, since we're going to talk about the resort shuttle. I noticed as I was running through the shuttle slides, it's tough to tell which of these plush signs I want to click on. I noticed as I was running through the resort shuttle slides that they do not specifically call out. You have to do some basic subtraction to understand what it is we're proposing the town fund sort of on its own on the resort shuttle. So hopefully this doesn't add confusion to report this or highlight it before I get into the slides, but the number that we are assuming the town spends out of its own budget on the shuttle for next year is $26,470. So with that, yes, the resort shuttle. Thank you to Craig for encouraging me to present this information in slides. It really is an easier way to present complex topics than a 5-paragraph essay or just an ad lib. So just kind of a glossary of terms on the elements of the shuttle service program that have been offered over the past couple of years, and especially this year. So The shuttle services offered in Alta in the fiscal year 22-23 and the 22-23 ski season include the resort shuttle. And when we say the resort shuttle, what we're talking about is the traditional around town shuttle service running between, you know, the West Alta residential and overnight lodging properties and the ski area based facilities. It's available on call. It drives up and down the little, you know, private roads and driveways along the bypass road. The town shuttle is that that service that we cobbled together kind of at the last minute when we learned that UTA ski bus service would be cut. That transported ski bus passengers from the Cliff Lodge and Wildcat Base UTA stops to other destinations in the canyon in lieu of that traditional UTA ski bus service. And this was offered kind of on a fixed schedule to match the schedule on which UTA buses were arriving in the canyon. And finally, the night shuttle that has been available the last 2 seasons on call. It's evening service between Alta and Snowbird. It runs from 6 to 10 p.m. And all those services were provided by Alta Shuttle, Tom Schneider. This is a little bit more information on shuttle service this past season. The cost for all of those services was $76 per hour. Each service was kind of supported by its own funding arrangement. And I do think it's important to point out that entities who contributed to shuttle service were contributing to one of these 3 services. And in some cases, you know, entities contribute to more than one of the services. I think most of us did. But they were each sort of put together independently. Down here in the bottom of this slide, there's just a bit more information, quite a bit more information about each of those 3 programs. You know, generally the resort shuttle ran from the middle of December until the second weekend in April, 9 hours a day, cost about $78,000. And it was funded by West Alta Lodging Properties, the ski area, the town, and $25,000 contribution from ACVP. The night shuttle ran for 1 week less than that. It started a week later. Again, 4 hours at night, cost about $32,500. That was funded by a contribution from Visit Salt Lake the past 2 winters. We're not going to be able to receive that next winter or going forward. There's a mistake here in this slide. The hotels, 3 of the 5 hotels in Alta, or 3 of the 5 hotels in Alta contributed to the night shuttle, and Snowbird also made a contribution to the night shuttle. Finally, the town shuttle, the schedule for the town shuttle matched UTA service. So that started the second week in December when the ski bus started. And we figured out how to get that service to run all the way until UTA service stopped. Now, there were multiple weeks during that service period where the road was closed. But that was the plan, and it ended up costing, about $107,000. We did receive a generous, we received a contribution from the UTA of $50,000 to support that service. Alta Ski Area and Snowbird supported the service, and then the town and the hotels each kicked in some money to provide that service to cover the UTA gap. As of today, our proposal for next year is to fund and operate all 3 of those service programs. We would do so through a contract. So I just want to be clear, we're not proposing to buy buses or vans, hire special employees. We're not going to train Molly, to drive the shuttle. We're going to hire a transportation company via contract to offer all these three services. These are some kind of tentative service plans for each of the programs. These generally work the same way that the service plans worked last year for each of the 3 services. A couple of the key differences are that I'm proposing to add an hour to the night shuttle service. What we heard from Alta Shuttle is that that gap between when the night shuttle started and the other programs ended seemed to be a problem for some folks. So that's certainly something we could adjust, but that's a key difference here. We assume for the purposes of the budget and for developing a budget for this program or project that it would cost $76 an hour again next year. The projected cost for all three of these services is $230,470. That's not rounded down from anything, obviously. That's just a typo that I appreciate Craig pointing out to me. A previous version of this document, I think I had rounded that down to $230,000. So $230,470. I'll just say that again. Yeah, once again, we'll establish a contract with the transportation company. We're not buying vans. As of today, we've received verbal commitments to contribute funding to these service programs. We've received that from basically the original resort shuttle partners. So that's West Alta Lodging Properties and the ski area. And we've also, we have what I guess I'll call a verbal commitment from ACVB to contribute the bulk of ACVB's remaining cash on hand to support this program next year. We will seek commitments to operate that third town shuttle program from UTA. And we think we feel we're likely to receive another substantial contribution from UTA. We can use $50,000 as a number for the time being. And then we're going to solicit contributions from the hotels in Alta and the ski areas, similar to what they all contributed last year. And the reason for that is, and I didn't mention this before, this is perhaps this is the first time we'll be mentioning this in a public meeting, but we understand as of today that UTA service next year to Little Cottonwood Canyon will be similar to what it was in 22-23. So the bus will only stop at the Wildcat Base, service that Goldminer's Daughter bus stop. We'll have about a half-hour service frequency. We will not have both of the routes. Well, we'll not have all of the routes that have service Little Cottonwood Canyon next one. I think we'll just have one route or some amalgamation of routes that amounts to the same amount of frequency. So there's some news. So again, total expenses $230,470. Revenue that we project receiving $65,000 from ACVB, $44,000 from the original resort shuttle partners. Again, that's Alta Ski Area and West Alta Lodging Properties. $50,000 UTA contribution, and then we're seeking $45,000 in contributions from the lodges and the two ski areas. That's what they contributed last winter. And I do want to be clear, we've not secured those contributions as of today, but we will attempt to do so. Finally, just a couple of unknowns. We've not yet budgeted or decided to offer an extra van for the resort shuttle service during the 9-day holiday period, but that's something that's been added on as funds are available in previous years. Basically, just the service is overwhelmed during the holiday period. So, if it costs $76 an hour, that'll cost about $5,400 to offer that extra van. We will go to bid to select a vendor. We don't know if, folks will be able to provide the service for $76 an hour this year. That's our budget assumption. Obviously the program, the budget for the program is based on contributions from private sources. These aren't reliable. They're not reliable. They're not as reliable as like Town of Alta revenue. The ACV contribution will be exhausted if we take it all in at once, and that is the plan for now. So eventually we'll have to raise revenue in some other manner to continue providing this service after this year. And then the future of UTA service is a big unknown. Again, we understand we're going to have similar service next year to what we had this past year. We don't know if or when UTA service will ever return to those previous levels. The Little Cottonwood Canyon EIS proposes express service in Alta to a single stop. So in some ways that's more frequency, but it doesn't serve the number of stops that we were previously servicing. So we will take our best step forward with this program for next year and consider the following year when we get there, I think is the plan.
All right. Thanks very much for that, Chris. I do think that was important to go through that detail. But time is limited, so let's move over to Jen.
Let me make one comment on this, that
Sure.
when Tom Schneider was relating the what had gone on in this year, he pointed out that there were 12,000 riders a month on these collective shuttles, which is just an astounding number and an indicator of how valuable this is to the community.
Well,
Thanks, Roger.
and Roger, I think we need to fight the UTA on not
Okay.
increasing the bus service this year. They just got $150 million allocated to them, of which this is an obvious use. And their refusal to even consider, if they're saying we're not going to improve anything, that is not consistent with the guidance from the legislature. So I think we're going to need to do something on that.
I
I
know I'm
appreciate-
an attendee, but may I make a comment? And I'm
Sure.
sorry, I can't see everyone, so I apologize. I didn't mean to speak over if that was John.
Go ahead, Sheridan.
I didn't think that we as a council had decided that we as a town were taking on the shuttle service.
Well, it's really split. I mean, financially, it's split among multiple, how should I put it, contributors. But we are essentially coordinating those various contributions. Is that an accurate description, Chris?
I think that is, and it's interesting that Sheridan brought it up. I think what the council has done is indicate support for the town to explore doing it. We have explored doing it, and this is the result of our exploration. What other kind of formal authorization to proceed the council might provide, I'm not sure. I mean, we could certainly not offer it, but it seems like it's going to go away if we don't. So I'm really sensitive to Sheridan's concern. I mean, it's a significant project that's going to take staff time and some town of Alta investment, but that, like I said, this is the results of our exploration of taking over the shuttle program, and I think it's up to the town council to discuss that.
Thank you, because I would like to know much more information about how much staff time we anticipate if we were to take on this project. And I am of no certain mind thinking that this is a business that the town wants to be in.
Okay.
I guess I have a quick question. Thanks for thank you for such a thoughtful presentation, Chris. I really appreciate the slides, and I thought that the seeing the numbers in black and white was really hopeful. I don't know why this is a CapEx project.
Yeah.
If we were buying the bus, I guess I could see it's a CapEx project, but we're not. We're going to administer this. So to me, I think the analysis is great. But to me, these are operating expenses and sort of general fund. The money would come in through the general fund. The expenses would go out through the general fund. This is really not a CapEx project to me. I think the other choice, we touched on this lightly last time, and I'm there hasn't been much time to discuss it. The other way to look at it would be as its own enterprise fund. Maybe that would actually help Sheridan get her arms around it or feel better about it. The basic idea of the enterprise fund is that in one way or another, the users of the service pay for the service. So either we could do it as a general fund or as an enterprise fund, but I think I probably would move it off the CapEx spreadsheet.
Can I respond to that, John?
Yes.
It is actually in the general fund budget. And this is when you change things, I think it often makes it's hard for people to track it, but the projects document that Chris and Craig and I have been working on, I think has kind of evolved away from just being CapEx stuff. It includes some other stuff on that project list, especially big ticket items. And so hopefully I guess I just wanted to say this is something that is in the general fund budget, paid for and expended there. But it's on the project list. And
John, that was your point when we reviewed the projects last time. We have to make much clearer what's OpEx and what's CapEx on that, and we will do that in the next version of that. I would call out that this year it's not very much money at $26,000, but going forward, if we were to continue the service, it starts to run into more substantive sums of money, which is why Sheridan's calling it out and deciding if we want to even do it this year is absolutely valid.
Yeah, and I would say that as I look down the list of this exhibit, this was the only one that sort of jumped out at me as, this is really an operating expense, not a capital project,
and the maintenance items.
It's a holdover from previous approach.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, is it over to Jen?
am I okay to proceed? I have a presentation here. It's kind of high level on the budget. We're going to kind of walk through the fiscal year 23 budget and the estimated year-end numbers, the proposed 24 numbers as they compare to 22 and 23 numbers. Then we're going to walk through some revenue assumptions, some expense assumptions, and some discussion on a high level. I am going to kind of move through this quickly because we have less than 20 minutes left, and I do want to allow the budget committee, council members and staff the opportunity to ask some questions. So if I go too quickly and you have a question on any of these slides, please raise your hand or interrupt me, and I'm happy to try and address it.
Is this tied to some material that we have?
It is not.
Okay.
This presentation will be presented on the town council website under the meeting materials, but it is not something that you've gotten in advance.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So this slide here, we're focused on what the budget was for 23. We have it separated out into revenue and expenses, and then the estimated projections for year end. And so I guess a couple key highlights on this slide are that on the revenue side, the reason why, we've been pretty conservative in setting our budgets historically. And the reason that this number is so big is really, I'll point to sales tax, interest that we've gotten on accounts that we hold. Those are kind of some of the big ticket items that we didn't really anticipate when setting the budget that we've recovered. On the expense side of things, these numbers, there's less variance here, but the big ticket item at the bottom is mainly due to the water projects that we have been proposing to roll over from 23 to 24. So that's the main difference here if we're thinking of other expenses. I guess I also just want to say that one of the things Craig and I have been trying to do is to use categories in our reporting and tie those categories to the audit. So this isn't all of the categories that the audit reports on. It's a summary of them, but they're some of the bigger ones. So we're moving more in that direction. But again, this is just kind of a step in that direction for now. This slide here focuses on, you can see here in the third column, the proposed fiscal year 24 numbers as they compare to 22 actuals and the 23 estimated year-end number. Let's see, highlights here would be on the property tax. You know, we have a proposed $120,000 increase. We are projecting, we're trying to be more accurate in our sales tax projection. So that number is increased over previous year's budgets for fiscal year 24. The big difference in the revenue, you can kind of see a jump here. And this is kind of a catch-all bucket, to be honest. Right now, we didn't divide it out into a bunch of categories, but the big ticket items in this are transfers in use of from the water fund. That's the biggest ticket item one in there, if that makes sense. So that shows up as when we use PTIF money, invested money, or money that we have saved, we have to show it coming in. And so that's kind of why these numbers jump, is because of those big projects. The personnel increases are reflected here in the expense. We have the outsourced contracts. Again, I think I kind of tried to put a little cautionary note on that earlier, that these numbers are, I'm working through that. In future years, we'll have better apples to apples comparisons once we have the input across the board to be able to project that. And again, the projects, you can kind of see how we have a big increase, especially between this year, what we expect to do, and in fiscal year 24, what Chris was just kind of proposing in his report. Does anybody have any questions on this one?
Yeah, would you go back one slide, please? Bottom row, total expenses of 3.3 million, estimated was 2.8 million. That difference is not 900K or 9K.
You're correct.
It's like
I'll have to fix that.
500K. Yeah, okay.
Yep. Yeah, you add these numbers up, it does not equal that holdover from an earlier.
Well, I'm just subtracting the two to the left of it.
I apologize.
That's all right.
I will fix that before I post this presentation online to have the right number, if that's okay.
I think the percentage is correct there. It's just
Yeah,
the
it looks
dollar
like
numbers.
yeah, percentage looks right. It's just the numbers wrong. Yeah.
And you can see we were conservative on both the revenues and the expenses. We
right.
underestimated the revenues and overestimated the expenses by about the same amount.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that's tricky about this is the analysis currently includes at least some of the CapEx projects.
This is all for budgets. Thank you. I meant to actually point that out at the beginning, John. Yes, it includes, this is everything.
So that's why we're having such a big swing, is
Yeah.
like the water project is probably the $500,000 of this.
Yep.
So to go through kind of just some of the assumptions in building the budget that we used, the tax increase from $180,000 to $400,000, going through the truth and taxation process. We will have a public hearing before the June meeting when we pass our budget, but we won't have a certified tax rate until August when we have a public hearing. Part of the issue with this is that we have to wait for the county to give us valuations, and then we kind of back into the certified tax rate. So it's kind of a timing issue. And that's in part why the July council meeting is held the third Wednesday of the month as opposed to the second, based on when we get those numbers. But sales tax. So we are proposing an increase in that. And that's just based on us looking at the historical data and trying to be more accurate. And I think in previous years, the council and staff have just been very, very conservative. But I think we're seeing numbers that at least Craig and I both feel confident putting into the budget for your review. Fiscal year 23, let me just make sure I'm going. On the expected increases for property tax or in taxes, I do want to say that we've been having a conversation about property tax, a resort tax, and a municipal transient room tax. For this budget, I have only included $120,000 increase, so $400,000 total for property tax and a 1% municipal transient room tax. We can, and I will provide information to the council on if you also wanted to do a resort tax increase from 1.5 to 1.6. That would add another $68,000 roughly is my estimate to the sales tax, but I don't know that we need to take that step at this time with the other tax increases. This is a summary of the truth and taxation process. The highlights are basically the property valuations come out in June, and we have to, again, just going back to what I said a minute ago about our council meeting being on the third Wednesday, just due to the timing of us getting those valuations that are set by the county. This allows also the town council to go through a budgeting process and identify what our needs are. Then what we can do is we can calculate what the certified tax rate would be. We can publish that information, collect public input, have a public hearing in August, and then the council makes a decision. That's kind of a very quick summary of what all of that says. Expense assumptions. One thing I want to point out in the personnel discussion and the review of Mike Swallow's study, and I apologize, I think this has created a little bit of confusion, but Mike Swallow's study really focused on base wages. But when we go to budget for our various departments, I also need to build in overtime costs. And so you don't have a direct relationship between a base wage and exactly what you're going to have in the budget if you just look at, 20, 80 hours for every employee or whatever. You have to build in a little bit of a cushion for overtime and other situations. So if that, maybe that addresses why maybe the budget numbers might have been a little bit different than what you guys have been expecting. The total increase, though, that we do have in the budget this year is about $178,000, and this does include 142,000 of that 178. Well, is basically for the 4 top jobs of the town.
So, John, this should answer the question you asked earlier. At our last presentation, basically, when we went through the salary stuff, we said 43 or 44 for the top 4 jobs, and then a total of 175 total. The numbers are a little different from that, but actually very, very little different from that we put into the budget.
Yeah, I guess, are the different department heads, have they signed off on this? Do they understand what this means for their people? I'm, of course, particularly concerned about AMO.
Yes, so that was one of
feel
the,
like-
when we reported last month, That was one of the things I said had not happened. Since last council meeting, the mayor has met with each of the department heads, received their recommendations, and those are incorporated in what we have presented to the council today.
Oh, great. So the 178 includes input from Maury and
Correct.
presumably from you, I guess. Great.
But as you see, John, it doesn't include John Gildner's transition contract. That isn't finalized yet. So that number's not in here.
Cool, but it includes the 4, including the wages we anticipate paying the new town manager.
Correct.
Yep.
And Maury's happy with the increases that his staff got.
I believe so, but I'll let him speak to that if he wants to.
Okay.
On outsourced contracts, I just kind of wanted to highlight a few things. You know, health insurance is a very modest increase this year. The biggest thing looking at our vendors was sewer charges and the disposal costs. And those, it's a cost share program in the Canyon, but those, and I will say that I do need to dive into the sewer and the water budgets a little bit more. I think the sewer projection is for disposal costs needs to be increased in next round's budget, but I just wanted to point that out, that that's a huge increase. And then John Goldner's contract, of course, we just said is not included in the department wages above, but in professional services within the budget. And then, just another thing that we spent a lot of money on this year was snow removal, and that's just highly dependent on the year. This chart over here is kind of another work in progress, but it's, and you did actually get a summary of it in the tentative budget where I have included account balances, and really the kind of the takeaway from this. So this is all account balances as of July 1st, 2022. So the very beginning of this fiscal year. So we basically have $4,000 or $4 million in the bank to work with. And we're going to work through fine tuning how to project year-end balances a little bit better. So that's coming.
So Roger, I'm mindful of time here and we have another 3 minutes left. So what I'm going to suggest is that questions on the budget stuff, we actually hold to the main meeting. I would like to make a couple of comments, which I think are fairly obvious, but I do want to emphasize them. One is we're projecting a big increase, not in the project budget, in the CapEx budget, but actually in the amount that we execute. And I think off the top of my head, the numbers are basically last year we executed about 125,000, and next year we're projecting that we're actually going to execute 775,000. I've pushed back on Chris several times on that, and the answer that I've gotten is it's all the water project. We're actually going to get that done. That's why we need this John Gildner execution project. Or transition project. And despite the fact that it looks like, a 5-fold increase in it, I think it's actually realistic this year. And I think it's important that we actually start executing on our CapEx budget each year because of what we presented last time, which is we've typically been accumulating money and we're getting more and more visitors that are putting more and more pressure on our infrastructure. So we've got to get to the point where we can actually execute those. So despite the optics of it, I think that's probably realistic. I think the second thing that I'll point out is if you look at the increase in the the total expenses, I think it's roughly 350. If you 350K, if you look at the 3 sources of increased revenue that we may have next year, that also basically adds up to like 340. So I would recommend that we actually do all 3 of those increases because I think we have been generating cash in the past, but anticipating more execution out of the capital budget, I think we're gonna need that kind of buffer. So those are my comments, and then we are on the minute here at the end of the meeting. So I recommend that we actually end this meeting, and other questions and diving into the detail Jen can do in the main meeting.
I think you've just made a motion to adjourn.
I did.
Any objections? We're adjourned. In that case, I'd like to call to order the Alta Town Council meeting of May 10th, 2023. This meeting will be held by an electronic meeting without an anchor location pursuant to my determination of May 2nd, and I will have more to say about that subject later in this meeting during the mayor's report. And Craig asked for a environmental conditions report in real time an hour ago. 15 minutes after that hour, we had soft hail falling, and 10 minutes ago, the thunder and sleet started. So that's where we are. All right, so let's proceed with citizen input. As anybody, are there any citizens who would like to address the council at this time?
Cliff Curry would.
Oh, Cliff, okay. There he is. Okay, I see his face. There he is. All right.
Hi there.
Hi.
It's nice to see so many good friends and highly valued colleagues and neighbors. I'd like to make a comment about the current budget proposal. We had about an hour of presentation about the budget. Didn't hear any discussion among council members about some of the supposed revenue items. And I see you have 20 minutes allocated on the agenda to talk about a tentative budget. Concerning sales tax, supposed increase, I have good news and bad news. Bad news and good news. The bad news is, I think the idea of a 1% transient room tax increase is outrageous. Setting aside the other 0.1% increase, Alta lodging sales tax is already almost 0.5% higher than Park City. That directly affects the competitiveness of the lodging properties. And to raise it by another percent, I think it would be outrageous and would harm the competitiveness of the businesses that support this community and that already contribute by far the lion's share of the town's revenues. So that's the bad news. Good news is there is no call or need to do this. The last time we talked about this was 3 years ago, and we reached a consensus among the council to wait and see what the revenues bring. And I have good news for us all today. I am sure that with the rate increases that the lodges have made, are making, and will be making, and that with the rate increases that the ski area will make, the revenues will take care of themselves. I assure you that if you keep the current tax rate, which is already 0.5% higher than Park City on the lodging side, the revenues will be made up, and there is no call to make a harmful increase in sales tax rates, which is ultimately just a tax on the lodging properties. It comes from the lodging properties because it raises rates by whatever percent is the proposal to raise rates by. So thank you very much for your time.
Okay. Any other public inputs?
We did not receive any written comment this
Okay.
period, correct, Molly? And
That's correct. I don't see any other hands raised.
All right. In that case, let's move to Mike Mon and an update from the ski area.
can I interrupt before Mike goes real quick?
Sure.
I did just see a new attendee join the meeting, and I know they've been paying attention to stuff. Do you want to raise your hand if you want to make a comment, Margaret? I wasn't sure if you just joined and we were just finishing citizen input. I wanted to make sure you had the opportunity. Looks like she's not raising her hand, so.
Did you get that, Margaret? Okay. No, she's not raising her hand.
Okay, just making sure. Thank you.
I also don't see that Mike has joined us yet.
All right. In that case, let's go to the consent agenda. Any the minutes, the staff and the financial reports. Any comments on that? Okay. I must say that,
I had
Go
one
ahead.
question. Is Mike Morey with us?
yes,
It was looking at the AMO activity report. And I was a little puzzled to see that we only had 3 avalanche control sort of responses. Is that just a question of what? It just seems like we had, dozens of avalanche control issues that you guys dealt with.
I would have to look at the report that I submitted. One of the things that threw our reporting statistics off is the duration of the events. So if we have a road closure that lasts for 7 days, that's a single event as far as our offense tracking goes.
Cool. That's a good explanation. Thank you.
And we had a couple of those.
Yeah, it just seemed like
For-
all of the
fortunately not 7 days, but
Okay.
long duration events. Yeah.
it seemed like all of the interlodge and avalanche incidents together added up to like 10 or something for the whole month. So it just seemed that was
Well, it was a
somewhat
real,
understanding your guys' involvement.
it was a really atypical period, where we had the extended road closures, where typically we would have corresponding interlodges. But as most of us recall, we were not in interlodge closure status, even though the highway was closed for the bulk of that time.
Yeah.
Country club.
Yeah. Unusual situation.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, comments, thoughts on the consent agenda? In that case, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Second by John. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, passed. Any opposed? No. All right, we've adopted the consent agenda. Looks like Elise has dropped out on us. All
He
right.
dropped out at the beginning of the budget committee meeting.
Oh, did she? Oh, I did not notice that. Okay, so we have several departmental reports. And are there questions or discussion concerning those?
Could I highlight a few things?
Yeah, please do.
I just want to highlight that we have a municipal election coming up. The filing period for that is June 1st through 7th. You have to come to the office in person to file a declaration of candidacy. The election will be held on November 7th. I have put a whole bunch of information on the town's website. So that should be up to date for everybody. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'm happy to help anybody that's interested in running for council to do so. I also wanted to let the council and the public know that I'm getting ready to send out letters regarding the remote water meter program. We are getting really close. I'm going to make my first order of remote meters here this week, and we're hoping to start getting those installed in June. So we're going to send out a letter that kind of gives a very rough schedule of this project over the next couple of years and just inform everybody of what's going on. And then, of course, there's going to be communication with individual property owners as we go through the process. So just trying to bring everybody up to speed on that and make sure everybody's aware. And then just a heads up that we will have some public hearings before the next council meeting regarding all of the budgets. So we'd love to hear from the community on those proposed budgets. Thanks to Cliff for his comments that we just heard. Hopefully others will join in that next month. And then we also, again, just to put it on everybody's radar, we will have the public hearing on August 9th regarding the truth in taxation. If the budgets pass as kind of presented. So those are just a couple highlights that I had.
Let me follow up on that with respect to the remote water meters. At what point do we expect the full town to be equipped?
3 years
3 years. Okay.
max.
All
Yeah.
right. And it looks
We
like
that's, I'm sure different zones, some zones in town are going to be easier than others and some more difficult, but I think based on the service area's previous experience installing these, and we've done some inventory of spaces, I think 3 years should be doable for them. So
right.
it's really exciting.
Yes. Okay, Mike has his hand up.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, since Mr. Mon's not in attendance, I might just say a couple words about Alta Ski Area's closing day Sunday.
Boy.
You know, there's a couple of words that I just don't want to use anymore. Atmospheric river, record setting, unprecedented. However, I was told that the skier attendance for that day was record setting at 7,500, which to my recollection is the most people that have ever been on the mountain. We staffed up in a fairly big way. We invited some folks from UPD and the state of Utah law enforcement to join us to monitor the parking lot festivities. And we're grateful to say that the day ended without incident. So I was counting on Mike to make a couple of comments about that, but since he's not here, I want to thank the ski area and Trainer from the Gold Miners who volunteered for us and worked the crowd. And I think everybody working together, kept things as in check as they could have been. Thanks.
That is remarkable. Okay, did Mike Mon join us? No, okay. All right, in that case, Anything else in the way of questions, comments, elaborations on the department reports? In that case, we'll go on to the, you just woke up. Did you want us? You just surfaced. Would you like to say anything?
No, I was just prepping for the fireworks resolution.
Oh. Okay. So the mayor, no.
Roger, Mayor, you're still on mute.
As everybody knows, our weather's continues to be unprecedented. 75 feet of snow this year is a bit, shall we call it, over the top. The harsh winter turned into a hot spring, and that complete with some wet slide avalanches and mudslides that caused the road to be closed for more than ever. And I want to emphasize the kudos to keeping everybody safe on this road and in this town. Fortunately, the governor is now recognizing those who participated in that and is holding a thank you event for public safety and transportation workers later this month. And there's at the governor's mansion. And other organizations are doing something similar. For instance, there's one next Wednesday at Golden Hills Park from 4:30 to 8. So if you're cruising by there and see a bunch of people, go in and shake hands. Secondly, the Little Cottonwood Road Committee meeting, it was held on May 2nd while everyone was in good spirits and complimenting each other. Lori Delaney of the UDOT Forecasting Center prophetically remarked that this isn't over yet. And later that same day, a mudslide closed the Canyon Road. So it was right on time. And as a hedge against more of this kind of havoc, Chris arranged to get 1,000 sandbags delivered to the Alpha Wildcat lot, not all of them filled. And I would encourage anybody who needs them to take them. But if you don't need them, don't take them because somebody else might need them. So also on the same day of that meeting, the 2nd of May, I met with Becky Hotsey. And the Forest Service is getting a lot more dollars this year. And she is now hiring people. And she will be getting an assistant for the first time ever. The Summer Ranger program was one of the main topics that she's interested in. We expect to have that back here this year. Now, if the summer road is not open until mid-July or so, it's pretty hard to station the ranger at the top of the summer road or at the campground. So we haven't really figured out how to do that yet, but we will have a summer ranger back. There's a wildfire crisis landscape project with considerable fuel reduction efforts. And she pointed out that every time a tree is cut out, so she gets 12 phone calls. And it's what she wants everybody to know is that these trees are being removed for the protection of the from wildflowers and for tree culling for particularly diseased trees. And the same day, the UTA ski bus service planning meeting was held. And as Chris said, it will not return to previous year's schedule, but be the same as this season's. And Chris outlined the local shuttle service to supplement their reduced UTA service. As the snow retreats, there will be more damage that will surely be exposed. I mean, there's unprecedented snowpack. And it's a good idea to have structures checked and repair them in the summer, which is really the only time to repair them. There are no reports that I know of a building collapse in Alta, but there have been some in Big Cottonwood Canyon. So we've survived. I kind of felt it was a close call, but it reminded us that unexpected emergency events come along, and they could be snow, fire, rain, or whatever, earthquake. So we're going to pull together an emergency drill this summer, and with the help of various agencies in the valley who are going to help us with that. We'll have an exercise that hypothesizes some particular emergency, and we'll go through how we respond to it. And I want to reiterate Jen's piece about the election coming up. There are 2 town council positions that expire this year, and I see Elise is back with us. She's one of them, which of course she's invited to enter to sign up to be reelected. And Sheridan, who seems to have disappeared, no, she's still there. She has indicated to me that she intends to run for an additional term. So that's great. But I want to point out that with no criticism of Sheridan and Elise's performances, which I think have been terrific, I think that a healthy democracy is one where voters have a choice, and the more choices you have, the more healthy it is. So all those who are out there in YouTube or Zoom land, it's time to engage in civic duty, and as Jen said, show up between the 1st and the 7th of next month in person at the town meeting, at the town office. We have a town manager who a committee has recommended that we make an offer to, and I need town council authority to do that. I'm not quite sure how to manage that at this meeting. Why don't I come back to that at the end of this? Craig Elliott was one of the architects for the 2003 community center proposal on the existing fire station library site. Is working on an update of that plan, and what the cost would be to rebuild that building, basically tear it down and start over in this era. It fits the site that we acquired from the Forest Service, and we'll see how many what program elements might be incorporated into that, and how that compares with the study that was done by ANEAD year and a half or so ago. Our Zions Bank has been hacked again by internet cyber criminals, and we are taking steps to thwart such attacks in the future. There was our usual dog drawing that occurred on the beginning of this month, and there were 2 lucky winners. It was done in the usual open, public, and fair fashion, I think at John's home, and yep, with Jen and John as the participants. The Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development has something called CDBG funds, which are community development block grants. we're ineligible to apply for those because we're too little. And but we have had for the last 3 years a contract with the county, which allows us to essentially bid on money that the county's gotten from the CBDG grants to do things to fund things in the town that we think are worthy. And we have to convince the county of that. That contract is expiring soon, but we're planning to renew that contract to give us this opportunity to make those and our next meeting will be on June 21st, which is actually the summer solstice, and I hope very much that summer actually starts by then. That's the end of the mayor's report.
Did we change the time of the meeting on the 21st?
We're going to talk about this. Well, let's see. Did we change it? Let's see. That's still this year. I think that it's the same time as.
Mayor, you just broke up a little bit, but I don't know if that was unclear to anybody else as it was to me, but the meeting is still scheduled for 4 o'clock on the 21st.
Okay.
Beyond June, we do not have a set meeting schedule. That's later in the agenda.
Okay, any questions on the mayor's report? All right. I have the feeling that Mike Bond is not going to join us today. And so, resolution on fireworks. Cameron, you want to say something about that?
Sure. This is just the annual resolution that the state law requires to prohibit fireworks before and after the 2 holidays of well, there's 4 in the statute, but the 2 that are issue are the ones in June or July, rather, sorry. And so we have to pass this resolution every year before July 1st, and we have to provide a map to the county and the fire service to designate the areas that are restricted. We have preemptively provided the map, and then if the council doesn't want to restrict, then the resolution doesn't pass, then we would just withdraw the map from the fire service. The map is due May 1st, and the resolution is due by July 1st. And so if you want to restrict fireworks within the town beyond what state law allows, then we have to pass the resolution.
Well, essentially, weren't we disallowing all fireworks in the town?
So if we pass this, yes. So
Yes, okay.
it's a little bit backwards with the way the legislature has written the law. So the statute the legislature passed does not allow a municipality to restrict fireworks for the 3 days before and after 4 holidays during the year. So we can't restrict them during those days unless we do this. And so if we do this, it would restrict them the rest of the days and those 3 days before and after the holidays.
Okay. I believe that this resolution does not impact the traditional New Year's Eve fireworks display put on by the ski area, correct?
That's correct.
Does it allow any other fireworks display?
So the town could issue a permit if it chose to do so. If there was a commercial event or some other event that somebody wanted to hold.
Okay.
Mayor, it would also, New Year and Chinese New Year are allowable under the basis we've been operating the last few years.
And with a permit?
No, for citizens to use commercially available fireworks.
Okay. All right, would someone like to move to adopt this resolution?
So moved.
So moved.
So moved, okay, second, I guess, I think Sheridan and Elise will count one of them as a mover and the other as a seconder. Any discussion on it?
I had Elisa's first and Sheridan is the second. That's the order I heard their voices. So
okay.
just for the record, that's how I'm doing it.
All right. I think, Mike, you probably would be the most articulate discusser of this. You want to say anything further about it?
Oh, are you, with regard to fireworks?
Yeah,
Well, I think that the action that Cameron is prepared for us is the correct one to do. It will match other restrictions that we expect to be in place on the federal and state forester levels. We know historically that our wildfire danger goes up during fireworks season. We've got a very obvious interface with forest lands, and I think it's the right thing to do.
okay. Any further discussion of the fireworks ordinance? Or resolution? In that case, I'd like to call for the question. All in favor of adopting resolution 2023-R7 regarding fireworks, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right, discussion of possible action to adopt the town council meeting schedule for 23-24. I think it was Jen who published a tentative meeting schedule, which had every meeting starting at 3 p.m. Correct, Jen?
Yes, except for August, actually.
Except for August,
Starting
yes.
in July, I can just share my screen for a minute, but this is I think y'all can see that.
Oh, August starting at 9 p.m. Excuse me, 6 p.m.
6 p.m. Oh, did I say 9? I'm sorry. Yes.
No, I said
August
9,
9th,
but it's
6
written
p.m.
so.
And that's because of the truth and taxation. You can't hold those public hearings before 6 o'clock.
Got it.
So.
Okay. Discussion.
Well, I had shared with you, Jen, that what meetings during the winter schedule, so essentially December through April, it becomes more challenging the later in the day we get. So 3 o'clock isn't as good as 2 o'clock for me. Now, I might be the only outlier with regard to that, but I had raised that potential conflict.
And if I
Yeah.
could speak up for Carolyn, who's not here, she said that 3 o'clock is not as good as 4 o'clock. But it's
I see.
and it's worse than 2 o'clock. So I mean, Sheridan, you and Carolyn are pulling in opposite directions. And that's,
Well, then I'm happy with the compromise.
okay. Any other discussion, Elise or John?
I'm fine with these times and dates. I did, or I guess maybe I'd like the record to show that I did make Jen aware a couple of months ago and then again last week about the June meeting is not going to work for me. I will not be available on June 21st.
Let's talk about
but
that in just a second,
this
John.
year.
That's to this year, not next year.
Right.
Right, okay,
So I'm fine with these dates for next year and the times for next year.
got it. Okay. Elise, are you still with us?
Yeah, they work for me.
Okay, they work for you. Well, in that case, do we have to have a motion to do this, to adopt this schedule?
Yes,
Okay, I move that we adopt the schedule as published on the screen now. And for the 23-24 town council meeting. Second for anybody?
Seconded.
Second,
Seconded.
okay. Okay, any further discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? None. All right, in that case, motion passes, and that's the schedule.
Mayor?
Yes,
can you
ma'am.
Now address, I've spoken with Cameron kind of on the side about the potential of changing the June 2023 meeting date, just to ask that question of the council. Just addressing John's concern that the meeting is too late in the day for him to attend that meeting. We do know already, Carolyn's pretty much confirmed with me that she can't attend that meeting as well. So I think all of the remaining council members that affects are at this meeting.
Well, John, if it were at another time, could you join us?
I had been suggesting we do it the day before, but if we could do it in the morning, as long as I'm done by 2 o'clock Utah time, I could attend. So we could do like 10 in the morning would work.
I'm open to
Works
that.
for me.
But did Sheridan, you said works for me?
And so did Elise.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay, all right. I am certainly okay with that. Let me just take a look at my schedule. It's my brother-in-law's birthday. I don't think it'll interfere with that, but 10 would work fine. So let's move it to 10 a.m. on the 21st, the next meeting.
Can I
Thanks.
just ask a clarifying question from Cameron as far as we're just updating and changing the fiscal year 22-23 meeting schedule to reflect this date change, and we can get that published
Yeah, so
by
we
tomorrow.
do. Yeah, we'll need a motion and a vote, but we can vote to change the time, and then we just need to publish the change so that the public can be aware of the change.
And just to be clear, we're using the same date, but changing the time to 10 o'clock.
Correct.
I
So,
appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah,
You're
so
welcome.
June 21st at 10 a.m.
Good.
Wednesday, June 21st.
Awesome.
Okay, so next item is discussion of possible action to adopt the 2023 tentative budget.
I'm sorry, Mayor. I don't
Go
think we had
ahead.
a first and an actual second on that, or was I paying on that vote? Did I just miss that? Was I?
I thought, I don't know.
No, we didn't vote on the meeting time change. But we
I'm
did vote on the
sorry.
calendar.
Oh, we had to vote on the meeting time change for the 21st too. Okay.
Yeah.
In that case, I move that we change the meeting time for our next month's meeting to start at 10 a.m. in the morning.
Second.
Seconded.
Second by John. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 I think
Aye.
John voted aye. Yes. All right. The meeting time changed. All right, now to the 23-24 Kennedy budget discussion and possible action to adopt that. All right, Jen, are you going to lead this or is Craig?
I'll let Craig start and then I will jump in.
Yeah, I think where we left stuff off is, so first, the actual approval of the budget won't be finalized until the next meeting. So that's an important meeting. The objective in today's meeting was to present all the information so that people were able to ask their questions. And then if there are issues that people want to raise, we can start that discussion now, but again, I think that won't be finalized until the next meeting. So the items that people might want to raise are either their feelings on any or all of the 3 budget increases that we've suggested, sources of increase, And also if there are some expenses that they think that we shouldn't spend money on, then again, I think the next meeting is really where most of those arguments are made. But let's make sure we get all the clarifying questions out of the way in this meeting.
Yeah, and then
All right.
I guess I'll add that we are required to pass a tentative budget today.
Oh, we are. Okay,
Yes.
I didn't realize that. All
It's
right,
a
thanks.
tentative budget, but we
Yep.
have to go through the motions, and it's just, I think the intent there is to keep councils engaged and on track and working towards having a budget that they can pass in June. So,
You've told me that before and I duly forgot it. I'll write that off to my age. All right, so I think the real thing here is what questions, based upon the material that we've reviewed and distributed so far, does anyone on the council have?
If I could make a comment, it appears that our increase in the property tax revenue from 280K to 400K looks like a huge jump. But from the standpoint of a property tax payer, it increases one's tax bill something on the order of 1%. And I suspect that that will be swamped out by any reassessments of the property values. Now, of course, they're all going in one direction, which is not too happy. But it's while it looks like a giant increase from the standpoint of the town's revenue, or the town's revenue from that particular source, it does not have a proportional impact on the actual tax bills.
If I could butt in real quick here, people forget that we don't get any more money when the county assessor raises your valuation. We can only collect the same amount of actual dollars that we got last year. We don't even get inflation. So, unless we do a truth and taxation public hearing process.
Right. So the action that we're forecasting here, which is to take do the truth and taxation route, will increase the actual dollars. Okay, any
I'd
other?
just like to ask the council, obviously the way we're producing some of these documents is a little different. And I'm actually, instead of, the tentative budget was formulated out of an Excel document as opposed to a output of Cassell. It's given me a little bit more flexibility in some ways of, adding notes, columns and things like that. Do council members have any questions about any specific line items or anything? Do you want to have a conversation about specific revenue assumptions?
I don't have a question. I just like the new format. So that's been nice.
Okay, good. Okay.
I guess I appreciate that this is a work in progress, and I think you're making a lot of progress. I always come back to the kind of, can we afford it type questions? Like, can we afford a new town manager? Can we afford these CapEx projects? Can we afford the shuttle? Which potentially could be a couple $100,000 a year. And really, so I look forward to the dates where we start projecting an initial balance and an ending balance, because I think that's really the test of whether you can afford it. Nonetheless, in this format, page 12, the right-hand column underneath 23-24 future tentative budget, transfer to the capital projects fund, that's the number that's going to zero out our income statement. And so to me, what that says is we have currently, as budgeted, we have, I'll call it windage for lack of a better word. We have about 300+ grand of room in the budget at this point. So is that enough or not? Hard to tell. It's less than 10%. It's 6 or 7% windage based on the total gross revenue of the town. So I would say that we don't have a lot more money to spend. And this is assuming the couple of tax increases we go ahead with. And so I guess I'm also trying to address Cliff's point a little bit about need and what have you. I would say, you know, this is not a ton of money to be transferring to the CapEx fund at the end of the year to zero out our general fund balance. And I think that, you know, we don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars left to spend or excess money to spend. And this is assuming, you know, some pretty significant increases in revenue. We're assuming the revenue is going to go to 3 million, almost 3.5 million from 3.1 million. And we're going to have 300 grand of excess money. So, you know, I sure hope those revenue increases come through. The big one, of course, being the significant increase in the sales taxes. About half of the 300 grand is we're assuming that sales taxes are going to be larger. And I hope that comes true, because there's not maybe as much slack or excess there as we've seen. Some of the transfers in the past have been considerably more than 300,000 to zero out the general fund. So I think we've spent money wisely. This budget spends money wisely. I feel good about the expenses, but I also think we ought to have a little heads up that you know, we probably don't want to come up with a list of 3 to 5 more things to do with 6-figure price tags.
Thanks, John.
Craig, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize, so everything you said, John, I agree with. And I do want to stress what Jen said earlier in our revenue projections. Historically, and you could see it from the comparison we did between the budget and this year's actuals, we have been quite conservative on projecting both revenues and quite conservative on estimating costs. This year, we're trying to get more accurate in our projections. So we've changed our methodology there slightly, and that emphasizes the point that you made, John, which is we've got some room in here, but we don't have a lot of room in here.
I agree. I concur. I concur. And how does that?
Thank you for such an excellent. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Sharon.
I apologize, John. Please you go ahead. No.
Well, what I was looking for was another number that, you know, looking at the year-to-date actual versus prior year-to-date actual, we're ahead by less than 350 grand to this point. So, you know, we know these are subject to lots of timing areas and month-to-month variance, but we're not exactly knocking down the door, and nobody really knows how the April numbers, particularly for sales tax, are going to pan out. Yeah. So I think we're comfortable at this 350 of excess, but again, I don't think we should come up with a list of other things. You know, we can spend. We don't have much of a rainy day fund type slack in this year, and you know, I hope that we make it through 2024 without, you know, having to pare back expenses based on revenue shortfall. I think it's probably a 50-50 chance either way there.
Based on the Monday reports I get from the county on sales tax, April numbers look very good.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Even with all the closures, that's awesome. Well, I hope our businesses did well during that period then. So.
Thank you for everyone, to everyone who's done so much work on the budgeting process, and Jen and Craig for your presentation, and John for your thoughtful questions. To Cliff's point about raising taxes, and speaking to John Goldner's point as well, how little of some of our tax base we actually get to keep. I'd like to continue looking at what those three potential streams of tax revenue could mean for the town. I also am extremely hesitant to think about going forward with a very robust, multifaceted town shuttle program. I don't think it's in our wheelhouse. I don't think we want to be doing it as a town. I don't think it's in our best business interest. I could see someone else taking it over and running it as a business, but I'm not convinced yet that that's the best use of administrative and town dollars, even if it starts off as a program that requires very little town investment. I could see in the very near future that it would require a great deal of time and investment on behalf of the town. And so I don't think we should move into that without a lot of more discussion and more careful thought around that. And I personally feel that that kind of investment in terms of administrative staff and dollars would be better for our community when it came to affordable housing questions. I'd like to see that would be as well subscribed, if not 10 times more subscribed than what we currently have with the ridership numbers. And I think it would benefit our community in a more robust sort of soup to nuts way. So those are a couple of my thoughts about the current budget as we're moving forward on it. I also really want to come in strongly behind John Byrne in being anxious that this isn't much wiggle room, that we can't assume that we're going to have this much surplus going forward. We've had 2 outstanding snow years. I don't think we can safely assume that that's always going to happen in the future.
Indeed, it won't. And we could have some terrible snow years. So, yeah, we can't count. That's our dilemma. We're very dependent on sales tax, which is really unforecastable because of the variations in the conditions.
I do think we're taking the right step with respect to pursuing truth in taxation. You know, we've slowly sat here and watched our dependence on sales tax grow as our property tax revenues have declined over the years. And I think that Jen and Roger pursuing the truth in taxation, so at least we're going to stabilize, actually return to a prior year's level of property tax revenue. I think that's worth the effort. I'm sure that the paperwork's a burden and the process is somewhat burdensome, but I think it's important to not go further out on the limb of sales tax really being our only source of revenue.
Yeah, it's precarious.
So,
any further discussion on the tentative 23-24 budget? Sheridan or Elise? Okay, in that case, I move that we adopt the 23-24 tentative budget as published.
second.
John seconds. Further discussion? Sheridan? You lit up?
Just a second.
Yeah, okay, go ahead. Okay, we'll wait a second.
Oh, no, sorry, Mayor. I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Okay. In that case, let's call for the question. All in favor of adopting the 23-24 tentative budget, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. In that case, it is adopted. All right, last topic is discussion of officials' ethics policy and conflict of interest disclosure forms. And I think this is kind of between Polly Cameron and John Byrne. So let's talk about why do we need this? Why do we start there? And Polly or Cameron, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, I
Sure.
mean, you need it's good government, obviously, to have an ethical and conflict of interest policy. The policy, you're obligated to follow the policy under state law. The town of Alta doesn't have its own ethics code. Some towns do, but the town doesn't. So you would follow the state code. And then another reason is because it helps with your audit ranking as well. I mean, it's important enough that they've put it in their audit checklist and you get points if you have it. So besides just being good for government, transparency, and ethical actions, it's required by law.
Okay.
And
All
so
right.
really I mean, just to summarize what we're kind of looking at here, and John, I'm gonna hit on your email here in a minute, so unless you want to, but what we've done with these what John really is who drafted this, and Polly and I reviewed it and we're both comfortable with it on the ethical behavior policy, is we've just attached it to state code. And so that's really kind of what we're doing, is we're attaching it there. Their ethics code, seems like the right way to go for us. I mean, it hits on a number of different topics, and as that evolves, our code and referencing that, we would be automatically updated.
Yeah, I think the state code is actually pretty readable and pretty well done. It's not as plain spoken as maybe we could imagine, but it's readable. It's certainly in depth enough and elaborate enough. I think referencing the state code, which is actually in force anyway, makes it easy for people to sign this. I don't think we want to be putting up barriers to or scaring people away from public service because they read this thing and they're like, oh my God, I'm going to get in trouble. And this is too much. You're already subject to the state code. So you're not really doing much when you sign this except, pledging to honor the state code. I got a little confused. It's actually the conflict of interest policy that our predecessor administration wrote that I have the most issues with. And it was my intention when I sent in the sort of amended text that tied everything to the state code that we would drop this, that we would just let it expire or repeal it, or it's not our mayor anyway. It's envisioned when you read the code about these things, it's envisioned that like the current mayor could put forth this view. But honestly, I think that's kind of misguided, because that's where it becomes politicized. That's where, I start to question abuse of power. The code actually talks about, if you want to have an ethics commission, establish an ethics commission. If you want to be able to review these things, establish an ethics commission. Harris saw it differently, and basically, in an extreme example, you're saying that the mayor alone could determine that somebody is in violation of the policy and punish that person on their own as the mayor. And I just really battle against that thought. I think if anything, it should be either set up an ethics commission like the state code itself envisions, or that it's going to be the legislative body could determine that somebody had been in violation of it and have some sort of a punishment. But really, I would personally like to just see the 2-pager that Harris wrote just go away and stick with the edited interest disclosure form and ethics behavioral pledge, and not include, I guess it was in the conflicts of interest disclosure form that
Oops, wait a
John,
minute.
you have muted yourself, or you were kind of coming off.
Sorry, is that better?
Yes.
So was it your intention? So we, in the actual forms, I thought it was right, but then I do see that we've added back in Town of Alta ethics policy.
So here, yeah, let me address this. So there's 3 documents that we're talking about. Actually, let me pull this down. Sorry, my Zoom is in the way. There is this policy, the conflict of interest policy as signed by Mayor Sondak that you were kind of just referring to. There's the conflict of interest disclosure form. And there is the ethical behavior pledge. So this is the one we were talking about first. That's just all we're doing with these edits is connecting ourselves with state code. That's what that's essentially this proposal. I completely misread your, I guess, your email. When you made this proposal, I thought you said that you did not have a problem with the conflict of interest policy here. But let me just address it for a second in that I looked through this policy and I looked through the code, and basically every single one of these points is addressed in code outside of 7 through 9.
Yeah.
And
Jen, you're displaying a spreadsheet. If you were intending to put up, I don't think that's what you, yeah.
I'm sorry, I meant to share a different piece. Where did those go? How about now? Conflict of interest policy in front of you?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so all of this in my review today, and Polly, I don't know if you had a chance to review it too, and concur with me, but everything up until bullet point 6 is already pretty much included in the code anyways. So we've already kind of said that we're following that. 7 through 9 is kind of, I would frame as like administrative direction. And there is actually some administrative direction in the code already. So this is going beyond that. I guess one thing that we haven't hit on yet to just point out is that the mayor has the authority to execute these policies. And so I think from Mayor Burke's standpoint, though, he wanted to address this with the council and make sure if he was making any changes that, you know, the council was in support of those changes. So I say that because if the council wants to give the mayor direction today on what he should do moving forward with these policies, that's a great course of action. Otherwise, we could take no action or whatever the council wishes to do. I think that's all. Is that correct, Polly?
Were you gonna
So John, I guess
Right,
the one thing though that I did notice in state code is that the state code, and I have it up here. Let me make sure I'm in the right section. State code refers to municipal officers and employees. So one of the things that if we adjusted how we were doing this, adopted your language on the ethical behavior form, what I think we may want to consider doing is instead of it just saying, let me just go to here, officials, this would be officials and employees. We would want to match this municipal officers employees language here. And the state code though says then that employees would be doing a conflict of interest disclosure as well, but it's just at the point of hire or if something major has changed. So I just kind of want to, that's one of the observations that I observed.
Jen, could you go back to the one more, go back one more.
This one, the conflict.
Yes.
Of interest?
Let me
Okay.
talk about one word. Scroll up some more, please. under item 5. No, I'm at, scroll down.
Oh, this way, sorry.
Yeah. What if we changed may in the sentence that starts with item 5 to will?
So you can do that. State law does not require it,
I understand that.
but just so that you know what the parameters are of the state law, but absolutely, that could be a change.
So the state law does not require, but does allow it. Is that right, Polly?
Yeah, you can be more restrictive or kind of have a higher ethical bar than the state.
Okay, so it would then read with, when a conflict of interest exists, the officer shall publicly declare the nature of the conflict and will recuse him or herself on any official action involving that conflict. That is definitely more restricted. And it leaves it kind of I frankly like that better, but I'm open to discussion.
I guess.
Is there a significant, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Sheridan. Sheridan?
Is there a significant reason that, yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Apologize for interrupting. Is there an important substantive reason that we want to adopt an ethics code that varies from the state? Is there something specific that we're trying to address? Is there a higher bar that we feel we need to meet as a town? I'm just speaking to John's points. I'm not really clear on why we need to have an ethics code that exceeds what the state requires.
Well, my response to that is this, that I believe this state is known for having very loose ethics codes and performance for that matter. And I mean, that's the state we live in, but I'm uncomfortable with that. I think if we were to adopt a more stringent ethics code that would reflect positively on us, and frankly, I think we would all be comfortable with following those rules, those more restrictive rules ourselves. So that's my input on it, but I'd like to hear others. Well, Sheridan, did that answer your question?
Thank you, Mayor. It does, and I can think of a number of recent history decisions in the past 4 years that would have been different had folks been required to recuse themselves if there was a conflict of interest. But I also think it speaks in some ways to the nature of living and working in ELTA. It's almost impossible to not have, through one's relationships with other people, whether it's spouses or boyfriends or relationships with businesses in town that might require one to recruit. I mean, if one were to be very scrupulous about the interpretation of this ethics code, one to recuse themselves from doing a lot of business that staff and legislative officials have to do. So I think I certainly don't want us to have a low bar. I think that in practice, we've brought up a lot of the concerns. I'm just not certain if it's better to set a super high bar too, and then not have anybody who can actually run for office.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are exactly the kind of questions you get into that make following the state code attractive. I mean, we could have a dozen of these discussions about little points in this document. I'm going to stay with, I think that the document should follow the code, nothing more, nothing less. I get it that, Jen, you think that the biggest deviations from the code are in the last three, but there's also a lot, there's also some editorializing and elaborating on some of the other points as well. Yeah, that point's covered, but we're going further. I think we would just be way better off sticking with the code. In terms of Roger's example, the problem is, I would say with that, Roger, and I'm open to discussion. The problem is, if you make it a super strict standard, there's no leeway for reasonableness to enter the picture. And I'm just going to make up an example. Your house is right next to the Schranz Estates 10-house McMansion plan. There's an argument to be made that you would have a conflict of interest in the discussion and debate around the Schranz plan, because your conflict of interest would be one of their plans impacts your house greatly and one of them doesn't. And if you're going to have a strict interpretation, there would be no room for you to say, oh, well, that's ridiculous. I'm disclosing that my house is next to the subdivision, but these are my objections. And in that example, I think excluding you from the conversation would be a mistake, and that you shouldn't have to recuse yourself just because your property is next to their property and that you're going to personally be impacted. So I think that's where the may comes in handy, to have that kind of flexibility. And then in an overall context, I really feel like sticking with the code as the code is written is the way to go. That otherwise you're just opening the door to politicalization, everybody having their own spin on it, and then the enforceability and the ability to comply becomes murkier. I know all of us on the council well enough to say that we all intend to comply, that we all want to comply, and we don't want to blur that line as to what a compliance is. So that's why I'm in favor of the original edit that I sent in, that basically deleted reference to the town's conflict of interest policy. I think if you want to have a conflict of interest policy, I think we could adopt the code, but that seems like it would sort of be redundant if we're going to, just refer to the code in the disclosure form and the ethics pledge. We're going to pledge, our ethics pledge is going to be to follow the state code. That's what I think would be best and simplest.
Okay. Please don't anybody interpret my remarks to infer that I'm having any concern about any members of this group acting in an unethical way. So just want to make sure that's clear. Okay, Elise, do you want to say anything about this?
I think we should just copy the state code. I can't see any reason why we would not. That's all I really have to say on it. And the other thing about the ethics and recruiting, I can never say that word correctly. The way I in the past have interpreted that, and I could be wrong, is that, obviously I work for Alta Ski Area, and there's a lot of things that happen with the town and the ski area, but I personally have to decide if I have a conflict of interest, and then I can state that and, leave the conversation, or I can state that I obviously work for that business and I feel that I don't have a conflict of interest. And, I believe that I have to personally weigh that. So in an example of that John Byrne gave, I believe that Roger would have to weigh personally whether he would have a conflict of interest if his property was near the Schranz estate, and maybe he does and maybe he doesn't. But I don't believe that this requires him to not be part of the conversation. It just, he has to weigh that and state the fact. And am I wrong in interpreting it that way?
I think that I don't think you are.
No, the way the state code is, you're absolutely correct. And it's just either way, you have to disclose potential conflict, but then beyond the disclosure, it's an individual decision whether or not you can evaluate it fairly or not. And if you don't think you can be fair in your decision, then you would recuse yourself.
I think that's exactly right.
And it's up to the individual.
Correct.
Well, I also think historically, and we're small enough that if another council member thinks that you might not be able to openly discuss something, they're going to say that right out loud in the meeting. That's happened before. It's like, we think you're too close to this. You probably shouldn't even be voting on this. Rarely, but it has happened. I mean, everything
Yes.
we do is out in the open. So Roger, it's good. I think Alta's always been more elevated than most of the places, no pun intended, especially the legislature. But it's just what everybody's leaving out here is that it's just such a small town. I mean, theoretically, John Byrne, that was an excellent example. And taking it a little bit farther, maybe nobody on the council could even vote on a land use ordinance or a general plan amendment or a business license change. Or, it gets to a point where, it's difficult to draw the line, and it's more difficult to draw the line in a teeny little place where everybody is shoulder to shoulder.
Okay, good points. Good points. Okay, well, I think that if there's a consensus here, it's that we adopt the ethics policy that's on the screen. And that would, and nothing beyond that.
Right, the ethics policy, behavioral pledge that's here, where
Yep.
it's just referring to the code, so we're gonna delete the reference to the town policy that was in the other one. What is it, in
This
the
doesn't,
conflicts of interest disclosure for, well, we're basically gonna delete the town of Alta conflict of interest policy that Harris wrote. And if we want to have a policy that's just the code, that's okay, and then we would not change this, or we would take those 5 words out of it that Jen has thoughtfully highlighted there.
John, at the risk of emphasizing that I'm a tech weenie, I think if you're going to, I think the intent is to supersede and annul the previous, thing from Harris. I think that probably needs to be stated not in the form, but maybe in the resolution that adopts a form or something like that. So maybe Cameron or Polly can figure that out.
So, and I've talked to Jen about this a little bit. I recommend that you have 2 forms so that we have one for employees and one for town officials. And we'll make sure that we're matching everything that's in the state code. One thing right now, based on the policy, which was more administrative portion of it, it required it to be annually, and it required it to be notarized. The state code just requires that it be sworn, which it's not just a signature, it's a sworn statement, which we can easily update. And we can work with Roger to see what but I just wanted to point that out and find out if this was something that you wanted to do annually, just as not a bad practice to just make sure nothing has changed over the year. Obviously, you are obligated to update your disclosure forms when things change, and not just annually. But it's, a time to kind of check in and do it. So that's up to that's a policy question for you.
Well, I would, if we're going to change the frequency, I would change it to biannual, because that's the rate at which our town elected officials turn over. And
so the
it
state
would-
code actually specifies a schedule.
Oh, it does?
It does. In it.
Well, let's follow that.
So, right, so this was kind of the point, I'm sorry, I was making earlier, is that this section here specifies that when you're elected or when you become an employee, that you sign the disclosure form. So I think the simplest thing for us to do, I know I'm going against what Polly just said as far as having 2 forms. I think we only need a conflict of interest disclosure form itself, and then a municipal officers and an employee's ethical behavior pledge, and that ties to the state code and ties to this. And then it sounds like there is not opposition to annulling, or if that's the right word, getting rid of this policy. Because this is all covered in state code for the most part. I know John said there was some elaborate language in there, but I think what I was trying to say is the main points are covered here. So I don't think, I think that meets the intent of what you guys are trying to do in the simplest fashion, if that makes sense.
I think you said it just right.
Okay.
I think you said it just right. We want to make the old one go away, and then we'll follow the code. I think one tiny question. I think we could either reference the code so that as the code changes, we'll automatically stay in compliance. Do we want to attach the code as an exhibit? And I'm asking Polly and Cameron, I guess, mostly this question. That kind of blows it from staying in compliance if the state changes the rules. But I kind of like the idea that it's attached to the thing you're submitting. And so maybe people will actually give it 5 minutes and read it. That would really be the goal, would be to actually have people comply. So either way, we could either do it by reference to the code, or you could attach the code itself as Exhibit A, just so people would have it handy to read. However you want to handle that's okay with me.
I think that's a good idea, and I think that was what Jen was recommending as well. When at least one version I saw, she had taken a copy of that chapter.
I was actually, I think we can address this. I was trying to just have a direct link to the code so that we wouldn't make an administrative mistake as far as like not printing the right version of the code or something like that. Or, if we have a hard PDF in our files and we just print that off and don't actually go to the state code every time we're doing this and print that version off, that could just be a problem, but staff should be able to deal with that and make sure that we have the most current version of the code printed every year when we attach these documents.
It's a heavy commitment. I mean, this is a heavy commitment to read it over. It's a 3-pager, for heck's sake. It's not even 3 full pages. And you know what? To read it again every year when you sign this thing, I think that probably keeps it in the front of your mind. And it's probably a good thing.
And if the state amends it, we have to follow that anyway. So, and we track the legislature. So if there's an amendment, Jen says we work on it. We'd attach the most recent version.
Yeah, Jen, an easy way to kind of track it is when you put the attachment, you can just put the year of of the one you're printing, and that'll be a reminder too that when when it's reviewed, it's like, okay, that was from 2023. Let's double check that it changed. But as John just said, even if it does, and we can put a disclaimer, you have to keep update with the state code, and here's the link or something like that. We want to do it electronically, but since it's going to be printed out, I think it's a good idea. And yeah, we're going to know if this changes. This is an important part.
Yeah, I think we just need a little bit of extra language, just in that to just help prompt staff to remember to actually grab the live version instead of the
just
last
printing
version.
it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So as long as we're always doing that, then we'll be compliant.
Okay, well, let me bring up one other item, and is it necessary to have it notarized?
So state code just requires that it's a sworn statement. So we would have to, if you want it sworn and not notarized, then we can change the language in the form so that it's a sworn statement. If you're just following the state code, then it's a policy decision. The state code only requires it to be sworn.
And I'll just offer that both Molly and I are notaries at the town,
Yeah.
so it shouldn't be too too much of an inconvenience to come into the town to sign these. We can print off the forms and stuff, but up to you on that.
Yeah, I guess my only comment would be it's a slippery slope. And why would we follow the state code on 99% of it and then not follow the state code on this point? So I would say make it a state, make it a sworn, make it sworn is what makes sense.
Yeah, that, me too. Sworn would be, I mean, if you're gonna violate it, it doesn't make a difference whether it was
Right.
sworn.
Are we really
or-
gonna contest our signature or something? I mean, I just.
Right, yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
I'm so heartened.
Do we need a motion, Jen, or are we giving you enough direction?
I believe so. Polly and I can work on modifications and then, maybe we can circulate this before the mayor enacts it. Just to make sure we've got it right. I would propose that since the council's been pretty engaged in this conversation. Does that sound okay, Mayor?
Yes.
I have
I'm
one
so
thing.
heartened by our conversation around this as well. I just find it so encouraging, and I think that the spirit as well as the intention, the letter of these instructions are upheld when we all are honest about potential conflicts and can question each other about potential conflicts openly in public without it being necessarily a character attack. It's not necessarily pejorative to ask people about their potential conflicts when it comes to these issues. And I think that that's the true standard that we should be holding each other to.
One thing that I was just noticing also, again, this isn't required by state law, but other disclosure forms I've seen have asked for where you reside. Just again, transparency of, this person lives by Peruvian Estates, or this person lives in Albion Basin, just to have a spot where that is public information so that the neighborhood is known. Maybe it's what neighborhood do you live in or something like that.
Is this on the disclosure form?
Yeah,
Proposing that be?
but again, a policy question up to you.
Since we all know where each other lives, I don't see any reason why not.
And the state doesn't really have an approved form, do they?
No, unfortunately,
We're
part
gonna
of
use
this,
our form that draws from the statute.
yeah, unfortunately, the state auditor had some samples, and that was kind of where everything went sideways because their samples weren't very good, and that was some of the edits that I had made where it was referring to the county code and not the municipal code, that type of thing. So we're not really hanging ourselves out there with our forms because all it's doing is saying we're going to abide by the state code as amended. So
Great.
And that gets us all the points we need to get, or we can get.
Sadly, it's only 5.
Yeah.
that's 10. It's 5 times 2 because there's an ethic. It
Two
says, do you have, Yeah.
Right, there's ethics and conflicts of interest. You're
All
right.
right, all right.
That's actually I was actually gonna bore you with 1 minute on that. I know Craig and I touched base on it yesterday. If we're sort of ready to move on from.
I think we have Polly and I have good direction. We'll circle back with the council and the mayor on this.
At some point, and maybe it's next year's budget cycle. I don't think it's this year's budget cycle. At some point, we ought to be thinking about how we address our score on the fraud risk assessment from sort of a macro point of view, take a step back. These are small changes that are getting us sort of just over the minimum kind of number where we're not going to get a letter from the state, but there's a lot of room for improvement in this area. I happened to read the fraud risk assessment today, and there's quite a few of these things we're not doing. And I think over the next couple of years, I think that this administration, this council should help facilitate the clerk in checking a few more of these boxes so that we get, so we can score a higher rating and feel better about our fraud risk assessment.
I think, John, you strayed out of the discussion of the ethics and kind of conflict of interest and into the new business, which is just fine, which is the next point. But but I'd like to put to bed the ethics and conflict of interest discussion. I think, Jen, you said that you've got plenty of input to republish this, correct? Great. Okay, so let's move to new business. And John started it, which is how can we get more points, essentially? Like,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of wood to chop, and these guys are doing a great job. Jen, Craig, and Chris are doing a great job of chopping wood. But at some point, you know, hopefully in the next couple of years, while we have such a like-minded council, I think it's a golden opportunity for the town to look at some of the other deficiencies in the fraud risk assessment and our own fraud risk assessment, and look to plug some of those holes. The most glaring one to me is, you know, we probably should have an audit committee, because that's 20 points. And, you know, the committee would probably meet once or twice a year for about 10 minutes, but I'll leave that to Craig and Jen to suss out. Jen, do you think that that's the right path to tackle some of these other issues?
Yeah, I mean, I know that there was a proposal for an audit committee maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I'll look back at that draft policy or audit committee outline and share it with Craig and have a conversation about that. I think the reason for not doing it, if I remember correctly, was just being small and feeling that maybe the budget committee or something was already doing that. I don't necessarily have an opinion on whether that's true or not. But I kind of feel that I think that was the nature of the conversation at the time.
John, I think there are sort of 2 categories that are important to address, and I would suggest doing them separately. One is what I'll call normal sort of accounting rules that help decrease your risk. The audit committee would be one. Typical, another one is a whistleblower thing. You know, there are a few things that we can set up that I think are actually pretty easy to do and actually will dramatically reduce not just your risk score, but your actual risk. Because the risk scores are based upon, you know, lots of data. I think the other one, which is a little harder right now, and I think it's increasing, is the cyber risk. The cyber risk is real material. So I think it'll be fairly easy to come up with some simple things around the accounting type issues and cash flow type issues. I think the cyber risk one's going to require a little bit more invasive look at our systems and frankly our stack. But so I'm sure we can get to one this summer, and number 2, maybe Q4, certainly Q1.
And let me just to say it again, you know, much of the fraud risk assessment is oriented towards communities that have much more elaborate staffs.
Yeah, right.
And so there's got to be a balance, and I'm not sure that we're ever going to get a perfect score, because we just don't have the manpower. We'd have to have another person just to be in compliance.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't make any sense. So, you know, it's a give and take. I just think it's a general direction, you know, it'd be something to be proud of if we got to the end of Roger's term and we had, you know, ticked off a couple more of these 20 pointers. I think that would be good governance.
Any other new business?
Yes,
Okay.
there. At the Alta Gala, where I had an opportunity to see many of you, and with such a wonderful event, had the chance to chat with Kathleen Reeby, that's how we say her last name, our senator.
Yeah.
And had mentioned to her, as I've mentioned to you, that as such a small town, we're not required by law to meet Utah's definition of providing affordable housing. But she said, just because we're small doesn't mean we should try and sort of escape the issue or not try and entertain solutions around that issue. And I was heartened to hear that from her, and especially if we are partnering with the county, maybe there are funds out there for us to be able to use. And so at next meeting, perhaps I can bring forward some substantive, on the ground ideas about how we might realize this in Alta that are more specific and less philosophical than my last presentation around it.
Okay. I would welcome that.
A couple of things. We certainly don't want to skirt the affordable housing issue just because we're little. But in the past, I'd been talking to the people at the state that make this requirement, and I've explained that when anybody does a commercial project, we require on-site housing for employees, and we beg people who are building single-family houses. We can't make them, but we beg people to do caretaker units, and it doesn't cost them any extra, and it doesn't count as a duplex. We have a great caretaker unit, caretaker ordinance for Peruvian estates. And the state people said, we don't know how that really applies, but it sounds pretty cool. So yeah, we don't want to skirt anything, but we're doing the best we can with what we've got. And in the other areas, we're lacking the one thing that most areas with more affordable housing approaches have, and that's land. Well, two things: land and money. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. So keep going. Yeah, just wanted to make sure that everybody thought we're not skirting things just because we're small.
Thank you.
Say that again, Sheridan.
Thank you.
Oh,
Sorry, we're in a rainstorm right now, so.
oh, okay.
Roger,
Yes.
I had one thing that under new business, which is the Friends of Alta and some other organizations are banding together to give a thank you to the UTA or UDOT staff. It's being held on May 17th down in a park in Salt Lake. I will make sure that Jen gets the details and she can send that out. I would urge anybody that I cannot attend it, but if anybody can attend it, I do think they did some heroic work this year. And frankly, I think it's nice to just show some appreciation.
Yeah, I mentioned that in the mayor's report, but I'll say it again. It's at Golden Hills Park, which is pretty near the fire station. It's on Wasatch Boulevard. And it's next Wednesday starting at 4:30.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else from anybody? Well, let me say one thing about having such a small group where we all know each other. It is really nice to have a functional group like this where we work together. We basically have the same common goals, and we have little differences that we easily or comfortably resolve. And, that's one of the great things of living in Alta. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
Second, any objections? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. See you soon. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Excellent
Right.
meeting. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.